Toji finally gathers the courage to confess to his crush at a party. But after getting rejected, he drinks himself unconscious and wakes up to a nightmare. Police surrounded the whole place, and he's arrested for murdering and assaulting Mio. Even though he swears he's innocent, nobody believes him. His father tries to defend him in court but gets attacked by her family and fans, and Tojo is sent straight to prison. The prison was a hellhole. He was an innocent sheep dropped into a den of wolves ready to tear him apart. Tojo is brutally beaten by inmates and treated like a rag doll. The assaults were especially brutal for the ones punished for rape, but just after spending a couple days in prison hell, he was told another devastating news from outside. His parents died in what was supposedly an accident. This left him completely hopeless. Now he was truly alone with no one to call his own in this world. This broke him. When the same bully spits on his food again, Tojo finally snaps and unleashes his rage on everyone who tormented him. He had nothing to lose and all he sees before him is emptiness and rage. After waking up in the infirmary, a mysterious janitor reveals that his parents' deaths were no accident and that someone framed him from the very beginning. Seeing his tenacity in the last fight, the janitor decided to help him out. But as of now, Tojo was too weak to do anything. The janitor gave him a book to read and took him to prepare if he wanted justice. Determined to uncover the truth, Tojo is thrown into solitary confinement, where he spends 15 days fueled by revenge. When a guard finally opens the cell, he's stunned to see a completely transformed and insanely muscular Tojo standing in the darkness. No one could believe the change. Back in Gen Pop, the bully saw Tojo walking around at the construction site. Taking it as an opportunity, he called his boys to surround him. But instead of being scared, Tojo was smiling, excited at what was about to happen. The bully came forward, standing right in front of our boy and towering over him. He vowed revenge for the scar Tojo gave him. Everyone charged towards Tojo together, ganging up on him. He was getting beat from all directions, but Tojo was not responding. He looked for the perfect opening and charged straight for the leader. He is a one-man army with no attachments, which makes him the most dangerous. He tackled the buff leader, catching him off guard and sending both of them falling from the top of the building, 5 floors above. By the time they landed, the bully was lying dead on the ground, while Tojo sat on top of the body, shielded from the impact of the fall. The world doesn't reward truth, so he would do anything to make the people who framed him and made him suffer pay. Every single one will pay for everything. Seeing the commotion, all the guards and inmates rushed to the location while Tojo was still repeatedly punching the man who was almost at death's door. The guards screamed at him to stop. If he killed the man now, he would land himself a death penalty. The words instantly knocked Tojo back to his senses. He could not afford to die. There were many people deserving to die, and this bully was not the priority. But his rage was not extinguished. So Tojo screamed his lungs out, venting the rest of his anger for everyone to hear. After a while, he woke up in the infirmary again with his whole body bandaged. But the bully's state was way worse. His lower half was done for, and he would be in a wheelchair for life. The guard who came in to inform him of this pleaded with him not to cause any more trouble and went away. Nobody wanted to get involved with a guy who wasn't even afraid of death. But there was one man. The janitor from before stood at the door, congratulating him on surviving the test. Now that he had passed the test, Tojo asked the old man to help him escape this place as planned before. A cheeky smile appeared on the old man's face. He already had a plan. He asked Tojo to create a distraction so he could execute it. This was asking a lot. What if the old man used him as a scapegoat for his own escape plan? But the janitor assured him. He explained his plan to Tojo. The iron grate in the kitchen sewer had been loose for a while now, and if he caused a riot, the old man could use that time to loosen it further, so Tojo could remove it and escape in the chaos. This sounded like a good plan, and as the situation stood, there was no option but to trust the man. Soon enough, Tojo was released from the infirmary and returned to Gen Pop. The first place he went was the cell of the old bully. His lackeys were stunned silent when they saw Tojo enter their cell without fear. Standing in the middle, he announced for everyone to come at him if they wanted to settle the score for their bully master. But these guys didn't have the dominating aura they had back then. Even they despised the bully for always causing trouble and dragging them into it. So if anything, they were thankful to Tojo for taking care of him for them. One guy invited Tojo in and proclaimed him as their new master from then on. The scene shifts to the mess hall, where Tojo eats while the other inmates serve him. His new followers make sure the best portions of food end up on his tray, treating him like a king and calling him boss with smiles on their faces. Another inmate even offers his own plate to the new leader, but Tojo feels a little awkward about all the attention and says he can't eat that much. Meanwhile, at another table, prisoners are discussing the beating Gariki received. A brute named Yumi-san complains that the new guy still hasn't come to pay his respects. One of his goons reassures him and says he'll bring the rookie over to their side. Yumi-san smirks at the thought of taking control of the entire sector. The subordinate then gets up and slams his fist onto the table to intimidate everyone before approaching Tojo's table and asking if he's the guy everyone has been talking about. Introducing himself as one of Yumi-san's men, he questions Tojo's lack of respect. Tojo doesn't even flinch and calmly asks if he has a problem with it. His followers immediately become nervous and whisper that Yumi-san is extremely dangerous. From a distance, Yumi-san watches the exchange and quickly understands what's happening. He tells another goon to teach the cheeky rookie some manners. The thug angrily slams the table and starts yelling that the newcomer is getting too full of himself. But Tojo doesn't even give him time to finish. Instead, he drives a solid punch straight into the man's face. With a cold expression, he makes it clear that he isn't afraid of anyone in the prison. Yumi-san is furious to see his man getting beaten so easily. While Tojo's followers stare in complete disbelief, the thug is sent flying, crashes through a table, and immediately starts calling for his boss. Faced with this, Yumi-san gets to his feet, cursing at Tojo as he approaches for a confrontation. The entire mess hall falls silent as inmates back away from the scene. The fear on their faces shows just how serious things have become. No one expected the newcomer to challenge the top dog so openly. Even from the floor, the beaten goon swears he'll finish Tojo, but Tojo couldn't care less. The two men stand face to face, and the difference in size between them is impossible to ignore. Yumi-san says he's never met anyone as arrogant as Tojo. With a smirk, Tojo replies that he's looking at one right now. Before the confrontation can go any further, a guard suddenly appears and orders everyone to get back to eating. Yumi-san grumbles and warns Tojo that he'll regret this. He promises they'll settle the score during tomorrow's break before leaving with his gang. The beaten thug remains on the floor crying for his boss. One of Tojo's followers panics and warns that Yumi-san's gang will come in full force tomorrow, but Tojo calls them cowards and says they only need to finish them all at once. His fearless attitude leaves everyone stunned. Inspired by his confidence, one of the prisoners kneels before him, apologizes for being scared, and vows to fight with everything he has tomorrow. The others quickly agree. Tojo watches as his followers begin to find the courage they lacked before. That night, while the prison sleeps peacefully, Tojo quietly gets out of bed and takes a bedsheet from one of the bunks. He begins twisting the fabric with all his strength, his expression focused and determined. Before long, he has turned the sheet into a weapon for whatever lies ahead. The next day, during the break period, inmates gather in the yard for their free time, while two guards patrol the area without much concern. Suddenly, one of the prisoners calls an officer over and offers him some high-quality smokes. The officer accepts and steps aside with his partner to a corner. At the same time, Yumi-san and his gang arrive, already waiting to settle the score with Tojo. Other inmates gather around to watch the confrontation unfold. One of Tojo's followers notices them and shouts a warning. Tojo simply smiles, knowing everything is going according to plan. He faces the rival gang and challenges them to show their determination. Enraged, Yumi-san's goons charge toward Tojo's small group, and the prison yard erupts into chaos. A full-scale brawl breaks out. One of Yumi-san's men is quickly knocked unconscious, and as the fighting intensifies, Tojo demonstrates the full extent of his strength. Furious at the sight of his men getting beaten, Yumi-san joins the fight himself. A guard notices the violence from a distance and rushes over, shouting that another fight has broken out. The situation rapidly grows uglier as punches land from every direction. Guards rush in with batons in an attempt to stop the chaos, but Tojo uses his improvised weapon to land a crushing blow across an opponent's back. Yumi-san grits his teeth in rage as he watches his men fall. One inmate grabs a guard's arm, preventing him from using his baton, forcing the officer to call for backup over the radio. Soon, the yard resembles a battlefield with bodies scattered across the ground and red liquid everywhere. Yet, in the middle of all the chaos, Yumi suddenly realizes something strange. The man responsible for starting everything has completely disappeared. While everyone is distracted by the fighting, Tojo slips into one of the prison buildings. Inside, Sochia congratulates him and says they need to leave immediately. Smiling, the old man tells him to follow him for the next stage of the plan. The two quickly make their way through the corridors until they reach the kitchen and arrive at the exact location Sochia had mentioned earlier. Without wasting any time, the old man begins lifting a heavy sewer cover. After some effort, he manages to open the passage and reveals the way forward. Tojo watches silently with a cold and determined expression. Sochia climbs down first and waits for him. The passage leads into a dark and filthy sewer. Without hesitation, Tojo steps into the dirty water and begins his escape. Sochia warns him that the smell is terrible but tells him to endure it. Tojo plugs his nose as they continue through the tunnel. Rats run through the darkness while others swim through the foul water. After crawling through the disgusting passage for some time, The old man finally announces that they have reached their destination. At the end of the tunnel stands a massive metal gate blocking the path to freedom. Tojo asks how they plan to get through. Tsuchiya calmly explains that he prepared the area beforehand and weakened one of the bars so it could be removed. He tells Tojo to push as hard as he can. Tojo obeys and forces the iron bar loose with all his strength. The gate finally gives way, clearing the path for their escape. Just as freedom seems within reach, the old-timer suddenly stabs Tojo without mercy. The blade strikes him in the chest, and Tsuchiya reveals his true intentions. Wearing a sinister expression, he declares that Tojo's mission ends there and that he's going to kill him. The surprise attack sends Tojo to the ground, seemingly unable to react. Convinced that he has won, the traitorous old man turns and begins walking away. But before he can escape, Tojo grabs his ankle. Shocked, Tsuchiya turns around and finds a knife at his throat. Tojo reminds him that he always taught him to be suspicious of everything. Following that lesson, he hid the anatomy book against his chest, and the blade became lodged in its pages instead of piercing his heart. The old man grows tense as Tojo declares that he has learned never to trust anyone. Tsuchiya scoffs and asks if the young man intends to challenge him using the methods he taught him. Tsuchiya says he only has one chance to win. Tojo responds by throwing a towel filled with lime directly into the old man's face. Blinded by the powder, Tsuchiya screams in pain while Tojo takes advantage of the distraction and lands a powerful punch. The old man collapses to the ground, desperately asking what hit him before realizing it was lime. Tojo reveals that he already knew about the betrayal because someone exposed Tsuchiya's plan. Furious, the old man rises and swears he'll take Tojo down with him. But Tojo shows him the vial of acid Tsuchiya had planned to use. The realization fills the old man with hatred. He remembers hiding it, yet somehow Tojo got to it first. The expression on his face makes it obvious that he knows he has been completely outplayed, desperate. Tsuchiya charges forward and demands to know whether Tojo really believes he can defeat him. Before he can react, Tojo lands a brutal strike and follows it with a powerful kick that sends the old man flying, crumpled on the ground. Tsuchiya admits he was naive and that Tojo was right. Tojo replies that he will never make the mistake of trusting someone again. Bitter about being defeated by a rookie, the traitor laments his loss, but Tojo shows no mercy. He finishes the old man with a precise blow to the throat and then pours the mysterious liquid over his body. Looking down at him coldly, he thanks the traitor for making him stronger. With that, Tojo finally leaves the sewer behind and continues toward freedom. Once outside, he sees daylight and the distant city for the first time. He takes a deep breath and enjoys the long-awaited smell of freedom before taking out the meat he had used as food and bait during the escape. After escaping, Tojo throws everything into the water, knowing he won't need any of it anymore. Stronger than before, he swears that his revenge is only beginning. The scene then shifts to a restaurant where several police officers are eating. One officer complains that they still haven't caught the prison escape. The owner asks whether there weren't two fugitives who escaped. The officer explains that they found the young man's body, but the old-timer disappeared without a trace. Sitting nearby in disguise, Tojo overhears the conversation and smirks slightly. He remembers taking the ID from the old man's uniform before escaping. Afterward, he poured acid on the traitor's body and placed the ID on it, causing the police to believe the burned corpse was his. Unaware of the truth, the restaurant owner laments the young man's tragic death, but one of the officers remarks that he deserved it because of the terrible crime he supposedly committed. Tojo continues eating quietly, pretending not to hear any of it. Then the older officer mentions that the young man's parents stole the autopsy report. The moment Tojo hears this, his expression changes completely. He immediately realizes that his parents were eliminated because of that report. Determined to uncover the truth, he leaves the restaurant with a new objective, finding the missing document. Before he can leave, the older officer calls him over for a brief conversation. Tojo turns around without showing any reaction. The officer warns him to be careful because a dangerous fugitive is on the loose. Keeping a straight face, Tojo says he understands and walks away. Soon after, the scene shows a waiter casually walking down the street while whistling to himself. Unbeknownst to him, Tojo is following from a distance, watching his every move. The man enters a dark alley, wondering what he'll eat when he gets home. Suddenly, Tojo appears behind him and presses a knife to his neck. Panicking, the waiter says he has no money because he's just an employee. Tojo orders him to stay quiet and answer truthfully. He immediately asks who instructed him to frame Gaku Tojo years ago. The answer catches him off guard, and he asks what the man means by you two. The waiter then warns that he'll end up hurt just like Yuji Suzuki. Hearing his friend's name, Tojo is visibly shaken. In a burst of anger, he drives the blade into the man's leg. The waiter collapses, screaming in pain, while Tojo demands to know who hurt Yuji desperate. The man asks if he's really Tojo. Tojo presses harder, demanding to know who framed him and who attacked his friend. The waiter refuses, claiming the mastermind is too powerful. Losing patience, Tojo punches him in the face and places the knife against his throat, giving him one final chance to talk. Terrified, the man finally reveals that a woman named Rei Amano paid and threatened him. Hearing the name, Tojo immediately questions whether it's really her. The man explains that she was Mayo's best friend and became involved with dangerous people. Consumed by hatred, Tojo demands to know where she is. The waiter tells him she works at the Grandia nightclub and should be there now. Turning to leave, Tojo ignores the man's desperate pleas for mercy. The waiter promises to cooperate with anything he asks, but Tojo simply gags him to keep him quiet. Coldly, he says he won't kill him for now and tells him to wait. Then, without hesitation, he kicks the man into a well. Looking down from above, Tojo warns that if anything goes wrong, he'll starve to death in there before walking away, and leaving him trapped in the darkness. The scene changes to an isolated house in the middle of nowhere. There, Tojo watches Yuji, who is badly beaten and barely holding himself together. Yuji drinks heavily and laments that he couldn't avenge his friend. Tojo observes him from a distance with a serious expression. As he watches, memories begin to surface. He remembers their childhood when Yuji always protected him from bullies and promised that no one would ever mess with him again. Back in the present, Yuji swears that he will prove his friend's innocence. Eventually exhausted and weakened by his injuries, he passes out. Seeing his condition, Tojo decides he can no longer involve him in what is coming. He resolves to handle everything himself. With that decision made, Tojo heads to the Grandia nightclub to find Rei Amano outside the club. He spots a large man leaving with the woman he has been searching for. After saying goodbye to the customer and promising him an even better night next time, Rei checks her watch and decides to head home. As she walks through the city streets, Tojo begins following her from behind. Knife in hand, he prepares to approach her. But before he can do anything, she casually throws her purse backward and he answers a phone call and agrees to meet someone in 15 minutes. Tojo continues following her unnoticed through the crowd until she enters a place called Net Paradise. From across the street, he watches her enter and meet with a thug named Kagami and several of his men. Realizing this may be his only opportunity, Tojo grabs a can of soda and heads inside. When he enters the room, Rei complains about the delay, assuming someone else has arrived. The moment she turns around, however, she freezes in shock and asks who he is and how he got inside. Holding up the can, Tojo casually says he came to deliver a soda. As she reaches out to take it, he suddenly grabs her wrist and pulls her close. In an instant, a knife is pressed against her neck. He warns her not to scream and asks if she recognizes him. Terrified, Rei realizes it's Tojo and asks how he's still alive. Tojo immediately demands to know why she framed him. She denies it, explaining that it would have cost millions to set him up, and that if she had that kind of money, she wouldn't be living like this. Tojo then asks who the real mastermind was. Rei warns him that it's better if he doesn't know because the person behind everything is untouchable. She tells him to run while he still can. Instead, Tojo presses the knife harder against her neck, drawing a small cut, and gives her one last chance to talk. Frightened, she finally reveals that the mastermind behind everything was Kokosha. The revelation leaves Tojo stunned. He struggles to understand why Kokosha would have done such a thing. Rei points toward the door and warns him that Kagami's men are waiting outside. She begs him to leave and insists that she's told him everything she knows. Tojo responds that he has already lost everything and that revenge is all he has left. The story briefly flashes back to a memory showing that the two once got along well in the past. Returning to the present, Rei crouches down and writes something on a piece of paper. Tojo pins her against the wall and asks whether she's on his side or against him. She hands him the note and promises to explain everything later, urging him to leave. Written on the paper is her phone number. Tojo tells her he'll call tomorrow and warns that if she betrays him, he won't show any mercy. As he leaves the room, he comes face to face with Kagami and his men in the hallway. Trying not to draw attention to himself, he calmly walks past the group, dressed in pink suits. Sweat runs down his face as the tension builds. For a brief moment, Tojo and Kagami exchange a long, intense look. Kagami watches him walk away, convinced he has seen that face somewhere before. Later, back in his room, Tojo lies on his bed and thinks about everything he has learned. Memories begin flooding back. He remembers Koki, Yosha, and Mayo together looking happy. He recalls Mayo and Rei spending time together. Then he remembers the night he drank too much and passed out at the table. In that memory, he watches Yosha and Mayo leave hand in hand while he slept. Tears well up in his eyes as he wonders why Yosha took everything from him. Filled with hatred, he grips the bedsheet tightly and screams Yosha's name in his mind. The next day, Tojo goes to a payphone and arranges to meet Rei at a park that night. On the other end of the line, she agrees to the meeting with a serious expression. Later, she is shown at a bar with a client, trying to hide her nervousness. Eventually, she arrives at the agreed location and walks alone through the park. Tojo is already there, waiting and hiding. Stepping out from the shadows, he wastes no time and immediately asks the question that has been haunting him ever since his escape. How did his parents really die? Rei reveals that they obtained the autopsy report and were preparing to request a new trial. However, Yoshida became frightened and staged an accident to eliminate Tojo's parents before they could expose the truth. Hearing this, Tojo is devastated as memories of the tragedy come rushing back. With tears in her eyes, Rei apologizes for everything that happened to him. Consumed by rage, Tojo slaps her across the face and screams in anger. Even after being struck, she insists that she wants to tell him the whole truth as a form of redemption. Grabbing her tightly, Tojo demands to know what was written in the report and how Mayo really died. Rei reveals that the autopsy found traces of 3 men, but none of them were Tojo. The revelation leaves him completely stunned. She goes on to explain that Mayo accepted money from Yoshida and willingly accompanied him and his friends. In a flashback, Yoshida is shown giving Mayo cash and asking her to entertain his friends. When she asks what kind of entertainment he has in mind, the situation begins to spiral out of control. Crying Rei explains that Mayo was forced to take substances she couldn't handle. The memory shows one of the men offering her a strange powder at a party and forcing her to consume it before she has a chance to refuse. From there, the situation becomes increasingly disturbing as the men take advantage of her condition. Eventually, they realize she is no longer moving, and panic sets in. One of them screams when he notices that she has stopped breathing, heartbroken. Tojo struggles to accept what he is hearing. Gripping Rei tightly, he demands to know why they framed him. She explains that someone had to take the blame and that he was the perfect target. Staring at her intensely, Tojo asks whether everything she has told him is true. Through tears, Rei reveals that she was also threatened by Yoshida and that she despises him. Filled with determination, Tojo swears that he will kill Yoshida. Rei immediately warns him that Yoshida's father hired 8 elite bodyguards to protect him, and that getting close to him would be nearly impossible. She still tries to persuade him to walk away, reminding him that his parents would have wanted him to live. Tojo ignores the warning and tells her that he'll spare her for now, but she needs to stay out of his way. He then orders Rei to come with him and leave the park without explaining why. As they walk, Tojo reveals that he can't let her go until everything is settled. He asks for her cell phone and she hands it over without resisting. A short time later, he throws her into the same well where he left the other man. From the bottom, Rei yells that she deserves it but begs him not to throw his life away. Looking down coldly, Tojo warns that if he dies, she'll starve down there alongside the other prisoner. Accepting her punishment, she sits quietly at the bottom of the well. The scene then shifts to a nightclub where Yoshida is enjoying himself with several women. From a distance, Tojo watches him with pure hatred in his eyes. Standing before Yoshida and his bodyguards, he waits patiently for an opportunity. Eventually, Yoshida takes one of the women and heads toward the restroom, telling his bodyguards to wait outside. Realizing this may be his only chance, Tojo follows. One of the security guards stops him and orders him to stay where he is. Thinking quickly, Tojo asks if he can't even use the restroom. After studying him suspiciously for a moment, the guard finally allows him through. When Tojo reaches the restroom, he hears noises coming from one of the stalls. He knocks on the door, drawing Yoshida's attention. Annoyed, Yoshida shouts for whoever it is to stop interrupting. Without hesitation, Tojo kicks the door open. The woman inside screams in shock at the sudden intrusion. Yoshida angrily demands to know who he is and what he thinks he's doing. Advancing with a knife in hand, Tojo finally closes in on his target. The woman cries out in terror as he attacks without hesitation. Before Yoshida can react, Tojo punches him square in the face and pins him against the wall with a knife pressed to his neck. Looking closer, Yoshida suddenly recognizes him and realizes that the real Tojo is standing in front of him. At that moment, the bodyguards burst into the restroom. Yoshida immediately orders them to catch the intruder. To escape, Tojo uses the toilet as a foothold and vaults over the stall wall. His sudden movement catches the guards off guard, allowing him to land on the other side before they can react. Without wasting a second, he throws himself through a nearby window, shattering the glass. Seeing him escape, Yoshida offers a reward of 2 million to whoever catches him. The guards leap through the broken window and begin the chase. Tojo sprints through the streets while the 2 men pursue him relentlessly, shouting for him to stop. Eventually, they lose sight of him and continue searching further ahead. Hidden among piles of trash, Tojo manages to evade them. Though frustrated that he came so close, he knows there is still a chance for revenge. More importantly, his identity has now been exposed. Later that night, the story shifts to a luxurious building elsewhere in the city. A luxury car pulls up outside, and inside, Yoshida's father asks whether they are certain it was really Tojo. Furious, Yoshida vows that he will kill him with his own hands. Meanwhile, conditions inside the well have become desperate. The two prisoners complain that they are dying of thirst. Suddenly, a rope drops down from above. To their surprise, Tojo climbs into the well carrying a bag of food and water. Rei immediately asks whether he succeeded in killing Yoshida. Looking away, Tojo admits that he failed. The other prisoner crawls toward him and begs for water. Without a word, Tojo tosses the supplies to them. Desperate, the man immediately drinks. A moment later, Tojo's expression turns serious when Rei's phone begins to ring. The caller is Koki Yoshida. Tojo orders both prisoners to stay silent before answering. On the other end of the line, Yoshida angrily demands to know where Rei has been. Tojo says nothing. Suspicious, Yoshida quickly realizes that Tojo is with her pretending to be concerned. He asks where Tojo is and why he disappeared so quickly. He offers to free everyone involved, including Yugi. The mention of his friend immediately gets Tojo's attention, and he demands that Yugi be released. Yoshida proposes a deal, asking whether Tojo would surrender if Yugi were freed. In response, Tojo points out that he has both Rei and the other witness with him. Yoshida dismisses them as worthless and says he doesn't care what happens to them, unsure how to save his friend. Tojo finally claims that he possesses a copy of the autopsy report and can prove Yoshida's guilt. Yoshida doesn't believe him, arguing that if he really had the report, he would have exposed him already. Growing increasingly angry, Yoshida demands to know what Tojo actually wants. From the bottom of the well, Tojo shouts that he wants his name cleared and refuses to die as a criminal. Though he would rather kill Yoshida, he realizes he has little choice. Yoshida proposes a meeting so he can see the supposed copy of the report and even offers money in exchange for Tojo disappearing afterward. While Rei watches silently, Tojo listens to the proposal and eventually agrees. He tells Yoshida to send the location the following day. The call ends and both prisoners immediately panic, warning him that it's obviously a trap. Tojo calmly replies that he already knows that, but there is no other way. From there, Tojo throws the phone to the ground and warns that he may not come back alive. Rei grabs him and warns that he'll be killed since he doesn't even have a copy of the report. Looking at her, Tojo says he can't involve Yugi any longer, and that this is his last chance. The scene then changes as a mysterious woman helps him choose a new set of clothes. With a different appearance, he walks through the city while a chef searches for a missing knife. He later enters a store and buys 2 bottles of strong liquor before heading to an abandoned, ruined building. Inside the building, Tojo prepares beside a bonfire with his newly acquired weapons. He carefully wraps his hands, getting ready for the battle ahead. Kneeling before the flames as if performing a ritual, he lowers his head until his forehead touches the ground. The gesture carries both respect and farewell. With the city visible in the distance, he appears to be preparing for his final battle. He asks his parents for strength and swears that he will avenge them by killing Yoshida. As snow begins to fall, Tojo rises to his feet and faces the city. Soon after, Yoshida's guards are shocked to see that he has actually arrived alone. Tojo walks directly toward the large group of armed men. Watching from above with a confident smile, Yoshida orders his men to make sure the intruder doesn't leave alive. One of the goons immediately charges from behind, ready to attack. Surrounded by armed enemies, Tojo shouts for Yoshida to come down and settle things himself. Instead, Yoshida smirks and invites him inside the building to talk. At the entrance, the guards prepare themselves for battle. Tojo demands that Yugi be released first, or he'll leave immediately. With a simple gesture, Yoshida orders his men to comply. Moments later, Yugi is thrown outside and beaten by the guards. Tojo rushes over to help him, reminding Yoshida that he kept his word. One of the guards questions whether releasing Yugi isn't a mistake, but Yoshida explains that with Yugi injured, Tojo won't be able to escape. Yugi is stunned to see that Tojo is alive. Tojo tells him to leave the rest to him, but Yugi refuses, shouting that they're in this together. Growing impatient, Yoshida orders them to get inside already. Yugi warns that the building is a trap filled with enemies. Tojo calls out to Yoshida and tells him to let his friend go because he's coming in. Even then, Yugi refuses to leave. Tojo finally says goodbye, telling him to live a good life and visit his grave. As Yugi is dragged away, Tojo turns and walks into the building to face his fate. Inside, Yoshida descends the stairs with complete confidence. Tojo walks through the doors as if nothing can stop him. His eyes burn with rage as the goons surround him. One of them raises a bat, preparing to attack. Watching the scene unfold, Yoshida asks whether he brought the copy of the report. Tojo replies that he's not stupid enough to carry something that important. Annoyed, Yoshida demands that he stop wasting time. The surrounding goons prepare to attack all at once, but Tojo suddenly reveals 2 bottles and invites them to have a little fun. Confused, Yoshida asks if they're supposed to be a gift. The bottles of strong liquor appear to be Tojo's latest weapon. Before anything can happen, a new figure arrives. Yoshida's father steps through the door with a stern expression. Shocked, Yoshida asks why he's there. The older man calmly replies that he came to clean up his son's mess. At the same time, Yuji and Rei Amano are dragged into the building, bound and helpless. Tojo is stunned to see them captured. Rei is gagged and unable to speak. Yoshida's father scolds his son for failing to finish the job properly and leaving loose ends behind. When Yoshida asks whether they should eliminate everyone, his father cuts him off. He then asks whether Yoshida really trusted Amano and reveals that she was the one who leaked the report to Tojo's parents. The revelation surprises Tojo. Yoshida, furious at the betrayal, slaps Rei across the face. Enraged, he screams that he gave her plenty of money only to be betrayed in return. Unshaken, Rei shouts back that unlike him, her heart isn't rotten. She explains that she couldn't stand watching Tojo's parents suffer while searching for witnesses. Furious, Yoshida kicks her and vows to bury her alongside Tojo. At that moment, Yoshida's father approaches Tojo and asks whether he is Manabu Tojo. Tojo replies that after everything he put him through, he doesn't even recognize him. The older man smiles mockingly and says he has no reason to remember insignificant insects. Getting straight to the point, he asks where the copy of the autopsy report is. Tojo simply smiles and tells him he'll never get that information. The two stare each other down as tension fills the room. Yoshida's father then signals for his men to prepare for the attack. Boasting about the powerful forces supporting him, he says it doesn't matter where the report is, because everything ends here. Before leaving, he turns back with a cruel smile and reveals one final piece of information, pointing at 2 of the goons. He calmly states that they were the men who killed Tojo's parents. The moment he hears those words, Tojo's expression changes completely. His hatred reaches a breaking point. Clenching his fists, he prepares to destroy everyone in the room. Shouting Minoru Yoshida's name with all his strength, he declares that even a cornered insect fights back. He then hurls one of the bottles across the floor. The glass shatters, covering the ground with liquid. One of the goons immediately loses his footing and crashes to the floor. As he struggles to stand, he realizes he's covered in the substance. Taking advantage of the opening, Tojo rushes forward and lands a powerful blow. Yoshida and his father quickly realize the liquid is oil and call him a coward. Ignoring them, Tojo uses his knife to eliminate the first target of his revenge before striking him again to ensure he doesn't get back up. Furious, Yoshida orders all of his men to attack at once. The goons charge forward, but many slip on the oil and fall before they can reach him. Tojo sprints toward a massive painting on the wall and uses it to gain momentum. Launching himself into the air, he lands a spinning kick that sends another opponent flying. He lands with the knife still in hand, already preparing for the next move. Yoshida angrily calls him a show-off and demands that his men kill him. 2 more goons rush forward, but Tojo is ready. He throws a mysterious powder into the air, blinding everyone nearby. Hidden within the cloud, he moves through the confusion with his knife ready. The goons stumble around blindly, completely disoriented. Tojo strikes one of them and immediately turns toward the next target. Another guard tries to wipe his eyes, but the powder prevents him from seeing clearly, making him an easy target. A fatal blow lands in his back. Even as more enemies prepare to attack together, Tojo continues fighting against overwhelming numbers. Yoshida becomes increasingly frustrated as he watches his men fall one after another. Seeing his son's panic, Yoshida's father tells him to get the liquor immediately. Understanding the plan, Yoshida realizes that water won't remove the lime, but alcohol will. Before he can move, Rei Amano suddenly breaks free and grabs his leg. She holds on with all her strength, preventing him from leaving. Yoshida screams at her to let go, losing patience. He kicks her violently and throws her aside. Even as she lies on the ground, Rei tells herself that helping Tojo in any way she can is the least she can do. Meanwhile, the remaining goons gather themselves and prepare for one final attack against Tojo. Tojo stood tall among the defeated guards as the remaining men wiped alcohol from their eyes. The older man warned them about the slippery floor and viewed Tojo as a cornered target. The guards quickly reformed their line and launched another assault. One guard leaped forward, but Tojo countered him with force and drove him back. A sinister grin spread across Tojo's face as the rest continued their advance. Tojo grabbed a guard by the face and delivered a brutal blow that sent blood spraying. But Tojo remained calm amid the chaos. Torn sleeves exposed hidden metal weapons as another guard was thrown backward. Koki threatened to finish off the injured Yuji, But Yuji welcomed the challenge. Tojo responded with a cold glance before landing a heavy punch. More enemies rushed into the battle, yet Tojo calmly opened his metal lighter and asked if they needed a light. He tossed the flame toward them, igniting the alcohol and instantly setting the attackers ablaze. Koki kicked Yuji in the chest and raised his blade to kill him. But Tojo intervened with a lightning-fast kick that sent Koki crashing to the floor. Koki gasped in disbelief at how completely he had been defeated. Tojo pressed his foot against Koki's head and coldly asked if he had any final words. The older man grabbed a hostage and pulled her head back while Koki begged for mercy. Tojo invited him to resist one last time. Desperate, Koki offered money and promised to clear Tojo's name while his father attempted to negotiate a truce. The father warned that there would be consequences if his son was harmed, but Tojo remained completely unfazed. The woman urged Tojo to kill them all, while the older man focused only on saving Koki. Koki promised gold bars and cash, exposing his cowardice as he bargained for his life. He hurried up the marble stairs while the older man insisted they should take the payment and end the conflict. Tojo stared intensely as Amano remained in the older man's grasp. Amano was suddenly struck and staggered backward. In the next moment, Tojo delivered a lethal slash to the older man's throat, sending blood spraying as he collapsed to the floor. Amano watched with silent relief, while Tojo helped her stand. She warned him about hidden guns as Koki loaded a weapon and swore to kill everyone, carrying a heavy black bag. Koki ran down the marble stairs but froze when he saw his father's lifeless body. Furious, he accused Tojo of breaking their agreement and murdering his father. A voice called out from behind a partition, causing Koki to turn and fire repeatedly at the source. The distraction turned out to be a phone recording placed beside two bound guards. As the recording continued to play on the bloodstained floor, Tojo seized the opening and severed Koki's hand with a single strike. A powerful kick then sent the wounded Koki flying across the hall before Tojo pinned him to the ground. With overwhelming force, Koki demanded to know why Tojo had killed his father and called him a traitor. Tojo declared that he would finish the entire family to honor the memory of his own parents. A final strike ended Koki's life on the cold tile floor. Standing victorious, Tojo watched as Amano cared for the injured Yuji. He dropped his blade and tearfully declared that his parents had been avenged. Tojo instructed Amano to take Yuji somewhere safe while he remained behind. Snow fell as the exhausted pair departed from the mansion. Amano and Yuji looked back one last time while Tojo emerged, carrying a bag of cash and gold, urging them to hide. Amano admitted that she had betrayed him before, and Tojo forgave her. Yuji questioned why Tojo was not coming with them and grabbed his arm, promising to stay even if it meant going to prison. Tojo handed them an envelope and explained that he had a plan of his own. Amano immediately realized how dangerous his intentions were. Tojo asked them to trust him and promised that he would return alive after one final night. Amano struggled against Yuji, refusing to let Tojo face everything alone again. But Yuji insisted they should trust him and stay out of his way. Tojo silently watched as his allies disappeared into the snowy night. Beneath a stone bridge, Amano speculated that the documents contained proof of corruption among the city's elites. She believed Yoshida had obtained the evidence through his position in the police force. Yuji worried about Tojo's safety and wanted to go after him, but Amano restrained him, arguing that Tojo's plan was their only chance. She believed Manjiro had become a problem for powerful people, and that a deal could still be made dressed in a suit. Tojo walked toward a large traditional gate beneath the night sky. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he climbed the stairs toward a massive private estate. Guards blocked his path, but Tojo demanded to see Mr. Barda. One guard refused entry and informed him that the boss was already busy. Tojo remained firm and insisted the meeting had to happen immediately. A scarred enforcer cracked his knuckles and asked whether Tojo was looking for death. In response, Tojo revealed Manjiro's severed head. The guards were stunned and demanded to know what he intended to do. One nervous guard ordered him to wait, but an authoritative voice instructed them to let him pass. Tojo entered the courtyard while more suited guards observed him. God sat calmly as a woman in a white dress poured tea. Lifting his cup, God asked whether he was really Tojo. When Tojo questioned how his identity was known, God explained that arriving with Manjiro's severed head answered all questions. God asked why he should spare the man who had killed his subordinates. Angered, he slammed his hand down, while the surrounding guards watched in silence. Tojo challenged him to kill him immediately if his men truly mattered, or listen to his proposal instead. Interested, God asked for a reason to let him live. Tojo held out an envelope and offered a deal. The woman in white took the envelope and carried it to God, while Tojo stood silently. God dismissed the threat, but Tojo pointed out that powerful people would care about the evidence inside. God suggested murder as a solution, claiming Tojo was beneath him. Tojo replied that he had nothing left to lose and explained that the evidence would be sent to the police by midnight if he failed to return. God continued pouring tea and questioned what any of that had to do with him. Tojo answered that because he had last been seen entering the estate, God would be blamed as the mastermind behind Manjiro's death. God paused and realized that Tojo had not come seeking help, but had come to drag him down as well. Tojo offered a final choice: help him and profit from the evidence, or refuse and be destroyed together. God laughed and remarked that the boy's audacity reminded him of his younger days. Tojo drank from a small bottle as God agreed to resolve the situation on one condition. Tojo would enter his service immediately. Tojo accepted and pledged his loyalty. God ordered Mutu to clean up the murder scene and keep the police away. Mutu bowed and acknowledged the command. God then instructed the woman to treat Tojo well and ensure that he stayed the night. Tojo repeated his warning about midnight, but God dismissed it and revealed that he knew it had been a bluff. Tojo smiled as the boss walked away. Later, the black-haired woman began removing her dress, but Tojo approached her and gently placed a robe over her shoulders. He rejected her advances, explaining that he was exhausted and wanted to be left alone. Eventually, Tojo relaxed in a hot bath, while God commented that it was unusual for someone his age to suppress his desires so easily. The woman asked whether she should continue watching their new guest, and God replied that he intended to remain cautious until he discovered Tojo's weakness. The next morning, Tojo awoke and prepared to leave. The woman suggested that he stay and watch the news. A report described the fire and the deaths of the Yoshida family. She assured him that his worries were over and encouraged him to remain. Reaching out, she asked for his name. Tojo politely declined, addressed her as Miss Ayame, and explained that he still had unfinished business to attend to. He then left and headed toward the bridge where Amano and Yuji were waiting. Amano cried out in joy and rushed forward to embrace Tojo. She told him that she had known he would survive, while the injured Yuji looked on. Tojo looked at his friends and declared that they were finally free from the people who had been pursuing them. Amano continued to weep as she held onto her savior. Later, the trio gathered inside a dilapidated apartment building where a large feast had been prepared. Surprised by the quality of the meal, the man in green commented on Amano's unexpected talent for cooking. Holding a spatula, she explained that she had been taking care of herself since childhood and had learned how to manage basic tasks on her own. As they shared a quiet drink together, Amano asked Tojo what he planned to do next. Tojo suggested using the stolen money to start a legitimate small business. The man in green jokingly asked whether that meant they would all become executives. Smiling warmly, Amano replied that she would support whatever path Tojo chose. When asked if she intended to return to her previous job, she admitted that she had only endured it to support her sick brother, and stated that she was ready for a fresh start. The group raised their glasses in celebration, while the injured man eventually fell asleep on the sofa. Later, Tojo stared at the ceiling, while Amano, dressed in a long shirt, explained that she was homeless and asked if she could stay with them. Tojo immediately offered her the bed while saying that he would sleep on the floor because of the limited space available. Placing a hand on his back, Amano suggested that they simply share the bed instead of making things more difficult than necessary. The next day, while walking through the streets, the man in green asked whether Amano was moving in permanently. Tojo confirmed her situation and mentioned that they would need to buy more furniture soon. The man in green pointed out that their current cash reserves should be enough to keep them secure for a long time. Their conversation was interrupted when several tattooed thugs passed by. One blonde thug suddenly stopped and asked whether they were the people he had been looking for. Sensing trouble, the man in green immediately urged Tojo to leave. The blonde thug mocked the injured man's recovery and suggested that they had not beaten him badly enough the last time. Refusing to back down, the man in green insisted that he had done nothing wrong and told the thug to leave them alone. The thug stepped closer and threatened to crush him on the spot. He then slapped Tojo across the face and mockingly asked if he had a problem. In response, Tojo delivered a devastating punch that shattered the thug's composure instantly. Blood sprayed across the pavement as the thug stumbled backward, clutching his mouth. Tojo calmly unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the scars that covered his torso. The sight immediately silenced the surrounding crowd. Panicking, the leader ordered all of his men to attack. The thugs charged together, but Tojo remained completely calm. He effortlessly dodged a wild swing before driving one attacker face-first into the concrete with a single strike. Catching another incoming punch with ease, he followed up with a knee to the ribs that instantly dropped a second opponent. The leader's confidence vanished as fear took its place. Backing away, he admitted his mistake and desperately attempted to negotiate. Tojo grabbed him and stared into his eyes with a murderous intensity. Before things could escalate further, the man in green restrained Tojo and reminded him that killing someone would ruin the stability they had just gained. As they walked away, the defeated thugs issued one final threat, warning that their boss, Kuro, would soon come for revenge. Tojo coldly welcomed the challenge. The man in green explained that Kuro was a dangerous underworld figure who controlled many local businesses. Tojo immediately suggested defeating Kuro and taking control of the area. His friend remarked on how much his personality had changed. The man in green then mentioned two other people he knew and left to contact them. Soon afterward, the group arrived at a deserted industrial area where two rough-looking men were waiting. One casually smoked a cigarette while the larger man ate a snack. Tojo looked at them skeptically and doubted how useful they would be in a serious fight. However, his companion assured him that both men could be trusted completely. The man wearing a cap asked Yuji to identify their target. Clenching his fist, Yuji named Kuro-san. Both recruits visibly reacted to the name, clearly recognizing the reputation attached to it. Tojo warned them about the size of Kuro's organization and offered them a chance to leave if they were afraid. The smoker immediately dismissed the idea and stated that he had wanted to settle things with Kuro for a long time. The larger man agreed, saying that he had been waiting for an opportunity to strike back. Tojo silently acknowledged their courage, but warned that bravery alone would not be enough for such a small group to win. Not long afterward, a white van sped toward the area with its headlights shining brightly. Armed men quickly piled out and prepared for an ambush. A muscular man with a tiger tattoo on his chest and sunglasses asked whether they had arrived at the correct location. The scarred blonde thug confirmed that they had and explained that he had been watching the target since earlier that day. The tattooed leader asked how many opponents they would be facing and was informed that there were 5. He was also warned that their leader was a dangerous former convict and a complete psychopath. Smirking, the tattooed man boasted that his own prison experience made him even worse. Through a small opening, the attackers could be seen advancing with wooden bats in hand, while Tojo and his group prepared themselves inside. The man in the cap climbed onto a tall bookshelf and got ready to trigger a surprise trap. A violent crash echoed through the building as the door was kicked open, and both groups finally came face to face. The tattooed leader looked directly at Tojo and asked whether he was responsible for defeating his men. Laughing wildly, he demanded that his opponents give him everything they had. 2 attackers immediately rushed forward with raised bats. From above, the man in the cap tipped over a bucket, dumping white powder onto them. Blinded and disoriented, the attackers stumbled through the room, while their furious leader watched. The trap was reset and activated again, creating even more confusion. Frustrated by these tactics, the tattooed leader accused them of fighting unfairly. Taking advantage of the opening, Tojo grabbed one attacker by the throat and slammed him to the ground with overwhelming force. Another opponent was quickly defeated while the scarred blonde thug complained that their methods were dirty. Tojo responded that they were simply returning the treatment they had received. Soon the attackers lay scattered across the floor. The tattooed leader called Tojo a coward and swore to kill him. But Tojo simply invited him to try. Surprised by the response, the leader agreed to settle things one-on-one and ordered his men to stay back. He tore open his shirt, revealing the massive tiger tattoo on his chest, before charging toward Tojo. The 2 men collided in the center of the room while water continued dripping from above. Tojo slipped beneath a powerful attack and searched for an opening. A perfectly timed punch landed squarely on the tattooed leader's jaw, and Tojo immediately grabbed his arm to control him. However, the fight quickly turned against him. Kuro fought back with overwhelming strength and locked Tojo into a brutal chokehold. Ignoring his allies, Tojo shouted for them not to interfere, because this battle belonged to him alone. Amano quietly realized that if Tojo wanted to truly rule the area, he would need to win without anyone's help. Wearing a terrifying grin, Kuro declared that he would send all of them to hell. Tojo gritted his teeth and struggled against the crushing pressure. Thoughts of the people he had lost strengthened his determination. As Amano watched nervously, Yuji asked whether they should call for backup. Kuro mocked Tojo and insisted that someone like him could never hope to win. Remaining focused, Tojo adjusted his footing and firmly planted himself on the floor, preparing for what would come next. "This bastard!" Tojo shouted as he finally managed to throw his massive opponent backward. Wasting no time, he stepped forward and wound up a powerful punch filled with focused and lethal intent. The heavy blow landed squarely on Kuro's face, but instead of falling, Kuro responded with a mocking grin and asked if that was all the strength. Tojo had. The 2 continued exchanging brutal strikes as blood splattered from the violent clash. Refusing to back down, Tojo reached forward and grabbed Kuro by the head with a fierce grip. Pulling the leader toward him, He delivered a devastating headbutt. A brutal crack echoed through the room as blood sprayed from the impact. The scarred blonde thug stared in disbelief and asked whether their leader had finally been knocked unconscious. Kuro remained standing for a moment, swaying unsteadily while blood streamed down his face. Moments later, the tattooed leader collapsed to his knees before Tojo. Yuji's allies watched in stunned silence, amazed by the overwhelming display of power. Furious, the scarred blonde man shouted for the others to jump Tojo while they still had the chance. Before they could move, the large man stepped forward and blocked their path, declaring that none of them would get past him. Amano screamed for everyone to stop, insisting that the fight was already over. "You lost. Looks like we've settled our score," Tojo told the fallen leader. Even then, he prepared to deliver one final strike. His kick landed with a brutal impact, drawing a painful scream from Kuro. At that moment, the scarred blonde thug revealed that he had already contacted his cousin in the mobile investigation unit. Although his friends worried that they would all be arrested, Tojo calmly agreed to wait for the officers to arrive. "Relax. Nobody's getting arrested. We're going to wait for them to show up," he said. The man with the cigarette reassured a nervous Yuji, telling him to trust his friend. Soon, the steady sound of approaching footsteps signaled the arrival of the authorities. An officer surveyed the scene and immediately questioned whether a brawl had taken place. Kuro lied about what had happened and attempted to shift the blame. While Officer Hodaka commented on Tojo's courage, Tojo quickly realized that Kuro had the support of powerful and corrupt police connections. Hodaka sneered and told him that it was too late to realize his mistake, claiming that he could reflect on it from prison. When Tojo questioned whether he truly had that authority, Hodaka arrogantly declared that he was the law in the area. Kuro even asked if he would be allowed to hit them once they were taken into custody. Hodaka immediately ordered the other officers to arrest them. The police rushed forward with batons raised, ready to act, remaining calm. Tojo asked if he could make a quick phone call first. Hodaka laughed and told him to call whoever he wanted because nobody could oppose him. Tojo replied that Hodaka would soon be the one begging. Kuro mocked him and explained that Hodaka was the nephew of Chief Tanaka. He also mentioned the influence of Mr. Minuro, making it clear how powerful their connections were. Unimpressed, Tojo stared directly at Hodaka and calmly made his call. After listening for a moment, he simply replied, "Got it." As Amano and Yuji watched with concern, Tojo silently wondered whether God was truly as reliable as he claimed to be.